Hello, I'm Philip Reeve.
And I'm Sarah McIntyre, and we've created Adventuremice, mice, camera, action.
And yeah, we're going to read you a little bit from it. In this book, it turns out that mice love movies. And there's a whole mouse town on one of the mouse islands called Hollybush. And that's where they have all their film studios and make all their movies. And it's very exciting for the adventure mice, because at the beginning of the book, they get a letter from Hollybush, delivered by this bird. And the letter says that a famous mouse film director is going to make a movie of their adventures.
So exciting!
So exciting! So they set off for Hollybush and they get there and they're welcomed into the studio. And inside the studio, it's all dark and it's all lights and things around. And there's a bathtub in the middle. And in the bathtub, there's a replica of their own ship, the Daring Dormouse. And on the replica ship, there are lots of actors dressed up as each of the adventure mice, all pretending, like a pretend Juniper and a pretend Pedro and a pretend Fledermaus.
They get to meet them.
They get to meet them. They get to watch them act out a scene where the ship is attacked by an otter. But the trouble is, Pedro's quite small, isn't he? And he's not really.
Yeah, he's like, what's a movie?
Yeah, he doesn't really understand what's going on, so he finds it very confusing. Let's read and see what happens. Down in the bathtub, the super stylish pretend Juniper had run to stand behind the pretend Skipper. "Oh, Skipper," she squeaked, waving her paws about in a peculiar way. "Can't we turn back to the mouse space? I'm so afraid."
That's not very realistic.
Said the real Juniper.
I would never be scared of a silly old otter.
"Shh," said Scoot, waving at her to be quiet. "Don't be afraid, young Juniper," said the pretend Skipper. "I will protect you." Just then, from the churning waters on the far side of the ship, a terrible shape arose. It had long spiky whiskers and huge staring eyes. It opened its mouth to reveal lots of sharp white teeth and let out an ear-splitting bark. It was an otter. The biggest, scariest otter poor Pedro had ever seen. The loudest otter he had ever heard. The mice on the ship all squeaked with alarm and scurried to take cover. But the otter leaned over in a strange, stiff, jerky sort of way and reared up with the pretend Juniper dangling from his jaws by her tail. "Help!" screamed the pretend Juniper.
I would never make all that silly noise.
Said the real Juniper crossly.
Great special effects, though.
Said Ivy. "Shh," said Scoot. Pedro looked at his friends. He couldn't believe none of them were doing anything to help. Someone was going to have to do something, or all those actors were going to be eaten. Bravely, he scampered to the edge of the platform.
"I'll save you, pretend Juniper!"
He shouted. "Shh," shushed Scoot. There were lots of useful cables dangling over the bathtub, with microphones and lights and things hanging on them. Pedro flung himself from the platform's edge, grabbed the first cable he came to, and used it to swing himself aboard the ship. The deck was wet with rain and kept tipping steeply up and down, but Pedro was an adventure mouse, so he was used to that sort of thing. He scrambled to the front of the ship, snatched the sword from the pretend Skipper's scabbard, and flung himself at the otter.
"Take that!"
He shouted, and gave it a really hard poke. He'd expected the otter to say, "Ow!" That was what Pedro would have said if someone had poked him with a sword. His plan was that while the otter was busy saying "ow," it would have to let go of pretend Juniper, and then she would fall, and Pedro could catch her. He had not expected the otter to explode. He'd never heard of otters exploding before. It just wasn't the sort of thing that otters went in for. But it was exactly what this otter did. There was a big, loud
bang!
And sparks, springs and cogwheels burst from beneath the otter's wet fur. One of its eyes popped out and went trundling along the ship's deck, bowling all the fake adventure mice over like skittles. Pedro was so confused, he'd forgotten about pretend Juniper until she landed on his head and knocked him over. "What are you doing?" she asked angrily.
"I'm rescuing you from the otter, pretend Juniper,"
said Pedro. "It's a mechanical otter, you absolute dumpling," pretend Juniper shouted. "You've ruined everything."
"Oh no!"
Oh no, poor Pedro, how embarrassing. Well, has he ruined everything? Or will he somehow be able to save the day and make himself a hero again?
I bet he will.
I bet he will, because it's an Adventure Mice book and they usually end pretty happily. But if you want to find out how, if you want to find out what happens next and how the Adventure Mice sort this out, you can read Mice, Camera, Action!
Yay!
And there's an actual otter in it as well. There's an actual cute baby otter. That's not a mechanical otter.
Real otter.
A real otter shows up.
Whoa.
Yes. Whoa.
Cool.
Okay, that'll do.
That'll do.
Adventuremice.